This morning, we take a medical focus. Where do we stand in the battles against cancer and Alzheimer's disease? Are we any closer to that elusive cure? We'll hear about the latest positive and negative developments from three distinguished medical researchers.
Now, from 42nd and 2nd, this is Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Good morning, everyone. This morning, we turn our focus to two of the leading causes of death in the United States, cancer and Alzheimer's disease. We'll hear from three of the leading researchers in their respective fields who will update us on the progress being made in the search for cures to both of these diseases. Each year, more than 1.5 million people in this country are diagnosed with cancer, and thanks to advances in treatment, 2/3 of them will recover, and they'll join the 33 million cancer patients worldwide who have survived within 5 years of diagnosis. There have been many advances in the treatment of some cancers, but not enough progress with other forms of the disease. Dr. Sam Waxman is in the forefront of cancer research. He's a distinguished service professor of medicine at the Sinai School of Medicine and the founder of the Sam Waxman Cancer Research Foundation, which is dedicated to preventing, fighting, and curing cancer. Welcome back to Pix Close-Up.
Nice to be with you, Marvin.
So let's start off, Dr. Waxman. Can you offer any hope? Has there been any further progress that you could say will cure more cancers?
Well, we've already shown that in the last few decades that the mortality rate from most forms of cancer has really decreased at least 20%, which is a very substantial number. And secondly, in most forms of cancer, we now have treatable disease. Those are two major changes in what's going on. So people are living longer, having had cancer or with cancer, and more are cured of cancer. So I like to use the word cancer-free.
Rather than survivor,
yes,
cancer-free.
Yes, they are cancer-free.
So you've had these advances in many forms of cancer, particularly in leukemia, over the years. But what is new? What can you offer people who are reaching and grasping for hope right now?
Well, there's every reason to feel there's new treatment for your type of cancer. And I think the most significant thing is we've learned from research what makes cancer happen. And we can search for the clues by looking at each individual cancer that a person might have. And this is called personalized medicine, so that a cancer can be looked at to see what kind of mutations it has and then target a treatment towards that. Now this is here and it's being used more and more as a guide to more rational treatment. Clearly, this opens up cancer-specific treatments that we hadn't even thought about years ago.
Now, does this involve chemotherapy or?
This involves, chemotherapy may be part of this and usually is, but then again, there are mutations that tell you can use this specific new drug that has only come out in the last few years or maybe even a year and combine it and have a new approach to treatment that we didn't have a while ago.
So you call this personalized target therapy?
Yes.
And using different immunotherapy in the treatment?
Well, immunotherapy will come in as another important addition to what we have today that we didn't have only a couple of years ago. And that is an extraordinary, exciting field. It's very promising, it's very new, but when it works, it's fantastic. And we're learning how and when to use that alone and with other treatments. So I'm very optimistic about that.
Now reading from what I read in some of your papers and research, that immunotherapy seems to be the pathway to a future cure. Is that correct?
It could be. It could be. You know, cure is a word that we have to try to understand. The most important thing is, can you take a patient and keep them controlled of a disease? Most medical diseases are not cured, they're treated. Heart disease is not cured, it's treated. Arthritis is treated, but not cured. Cancer must become that way. I think people should have a different mindset. I have a disease, can you treat it and keep me well? And that's what we're looking for.
To remain cancer-free.
Or cancer-controlled.
I have to ask you this.
Yeah.
There was a report about a month ago out of Israel. The headline was, "Cure to cancer within a year." Was that hype, or is that something that people
Well, I
to
don't
be
know the right
optimistic.
word for it. It shouldn't have been in the newspaper. Whoever placed it there had a good publicist, in my opinion. It's really quite impossible to take research, the way I understand it, with this particular company, from a mouse to a human. And it was in that stage, so it hadn't even been tried in a human. Many things in a lab seem very promising and tested, and when it gets to a human, it's not. The process of proving that it works is probably from that at least 5 years. Now, the second thing, if it works, using the word cure is absolutely overly optimistic and misleading. And so it is really a vast overemphasis on something they don't have.
So they did more of a disservice because there's nothing.
As an oncologist, I think it gives people false hope.
Let me turn to leukemia, because there have been so many advances in the area of leukemia, and you in your lab and your research, you are responsible, along with a colleague in China, for finding a cure to a rare form of leukemia. Where do we stand on that research, or what was particularly what you found?
Right. Well, we found the cause of a form of leukemia. It was kind of a gene mistake. And we simply attacked that problem, and we attacked it with two relatively non-toxic drugs, and we're able to eradicate this horrible cancer, this leukemia, without the need for chemotherapy. That is really an amazing story. No one has quite been able to do this in other forms of leukemia or cancer, but we still go with this notion that we can change the destiny of a cancer cell and normalize it and make it die naturally if you know the trigger that caused the cancer. And so there's a lot of research going on throughout the world. In fact, the Samuel Waxman Cancer Research Foundation supports this work in 30 different research sites internationally.
Now, you've had a lot of success, and there has overall, your research,
yeah.
But leukemias have been brought down. The incidence and the rate of being cancer-free has intensified, has it not?
Well, yes. I mean, the incidence has not decreased. Leukemia-like diseases, in fact, are generally increasing the incidence, particularly as we age. So it's still a major challenge. We still have a lot to go, because when we talk about leukemia, we're talking about many, many different disease states with many, many mutations. So each one has to be attacked very separately, and that's what's happening now. Specific treatments for leukemia for an individual patient has a better chance of making them leukemia-free.
Challenges. One of the big challenges is pancreatic cancer. I know in your research that you are working on some new hopefully progress in that area, but it's been in the news because we heard recently someone who's beloved by this nation for years, Alex Trebek, had announced that he is suffering from pancreatic cancer. Is there any hope you can offer out there? Any advances in the research?
You know, I'd like to say we have something new that's going to be available next week or next year, but we're still in a little bit of a dilemma here, because the triggers, the problems that cause pancreatic cancer, the fundamental mutations that make this happen, have not become druggable. So to attack it directly has not been possible. Secondly, it's a very difficult disease to diagnose early enough to really intervene and surgically cure it.
I have to ask this, why? Why is it not discovered and diagnosed until it's at the 4th stage? Why isn't it diagnosed earlier?
Well, generally, by the time you have a symptom of pancreatic cancer, it's already advanced. So it's a sneaky disease, and it's very hard to pick up if you're seeing your doctor. And then if we'd love to have a blood test that would be diagnostic of early pancreatic cancer. We don't have it yet. A lot of people are working on that, and I believe that we could pick it up early. You could surgically treat it and augment that with other medical treatments. It's just not here yet.
One of the highest forms of cancer is also lung cancer, and much of that, 90% of that, is brought on by smoking. Any new advances on that?
Yes, I think that's a very good example of what I've been trying to say. Lung cancer is not just one kind of lung cancer. It is divided now into what makes lung cancer happen at the gene level. So there are different subtypes of lung cancer now that become very treatable with targeted treatments. And patients go right to that instead of getting chemotherapy and do quite better with these new treatments. So there really is new options. But most of all, lung cancer is going down in incidence because people are becoming educated not to smoke. And if we can get that across, and we have a better chance of not getting that disease. So it's preventable in many cases.
What about environmental factors?
They all are important. They all are important, and so putting them all together, education, control of the environment as best as we can, are very important. And early diagnosis. Every smoker should have a scan of their lungs to see where they are, if they've gotten to that history.
A couple of years ago, I did a story at the University of Pennsylvania where they were experimenting with a mutation of the HIV virus, which killed so many people, to cure some forms of leukemia. Are you familiar with that study?
You know, I think I'm familiar with it. The idea was try to get an immune reaction to that. And in many ways, there is this viral inflammation in cancer cells that may aid immune therapy. And so that, therefore, this makes some sense.
The bottom line is that what I've read is that half of all cancers and cancer deaths are preventable.
I think that's probably true. We can prevent, this is really exciting, we can prevent cervical cancer, which is a viral disease with a vaccine, anal cancer the same, penile cancer, these are all important things. We can prevent hepatitis C with a medicine, that's the major cause of liver cancer, and on and on. So definitely, plus surveillance, plus
all sounds very encouraging. Dr. Samuel Waxman, who is the founder of the Sam Waxman Cancer Research Foundation, and congratulations on all your work and much success in the future.
Great to be with you, Marvin.
We're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about Alzheimer's disease. Stay with us. More than 5.5 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease. It's estimated 400,000 of them right here in New York State alone. Now, it's a degenerative disease that eventually robs people of their memory. First diagnosed over a century ago, its cause is still being studied, and still there is no known cure. But the research is ongoing. My next two guests are at the leading edge of research. Dr. Richard Isaacson is director of the Alzheimer's Prevention Clinic at Weill Cornell Medicine and New York Presbyterian Hospital. He's written several studies on prevention methods. And Dr. Arjun Masurkar is the clinical core director of New York University's Alzheimer's Disease Center and assistant professor of neurology, neuroscience, and physiology. Thank you for coming in. While I was going to start off with a question looking for some positives, I have to start off with something that's very current, and it's a negative. It was a test that seemed to be very promising of a new drug, a new treatment, that was pulled just yesterday. Can you tell me about it?
Sure. Yeah, so this was a trial for a drug, an antibody that was looking to clear the amyloid plaque from the brains of people who had the very early stages of Alzheimer's disease. And although there was initial excitement about it, based on some preliminary findings a couple of years ago, the final outcome, it turned out that it did not have the effect that we thought it would.
Aducanumab is the name of the drug, right?
Aducanumab. You say tomato, I say tomato. This is a tough one because there was a lot of hope for this certain specific drug. And even though the study failed, I still think there is still hope, and we'll talk about that, because with every failure we learn something. So we're going to take what we learned.
What have you learned, or what have you learned from this failure?
Well, we've learned that either the drug didn't work, or maybe we didn't use it at the right time. So Alzheimer's disease starts in the brain decades before the first symptom of memory loss. So when my Uncle Bob was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 30 years ago, he had memory trouble and they diagnosed him. But in him, the disease started decades before. So maybe this drug didn't work because we were using it too late when memory loss started. But the new era of risk reduction and Alzheimer's prevention is here. And if we can use these drugs earlier on, then maybe we can have some benefits.
You're two medical researchers. What through your research have you found that can offer some promise to people who are suffering from Alzheimer's?
Well, I think that we're looking at Alzheimer's disease very broadly now. For a long time, including this trial, I think the focus was on clearing out these amyloid plaques that are the presumed cause of destruction in the brain. But I think we're taking a much more broad approach to the disease. We're looking at a lot of preventative strategies, looking at a lot of lifestyle changes, things that I call low-hanging fruit that I discuss with my patients, things that may not have a direct impact on reducing the disease at a biological level, but may have some impact on how it affects the body and the brain in general.
You are doing a study that impacts what the impact of blood pressure has on your mind and the onset of Alzheimer's. How was that study going?
So that's a study that was funded by the Alzheimer's that was funded by the Alzheimer's Association, and the second phase of that will continue to be funded by them. It's looking at the role of blood pressure control in the progression of Alzheimer's disease. We know that, well, the brain gets blood, and we have a lot of knowledge about blood flow and how the heart works from the cardiology field, and so it would make sense to apply a lot of that to Alzheimer's disease progression, prevention of progression. And so the idea was to see if lowering the blood pressure would help with the progression of memory loss and function in Alzheimer's disease patients. And the initial phase of the study actually looked very promising. And that's great because we know a lot about blood pressure. Everybody knows about blood pressure drugs, and this is something that's out there. And so the second phase will look at it more carefully to see exactly what are the parameters, what drugs, how should we be delivering the medications.
Now your focus is nutrition and diet.
Yeah, so we look at Alzheimer's disease in a pretty comprehensive way. And I think most people think of Alzheimer's as a brain disease, but I think of it as a medical condition. And what we do in the body affects the brain. So what we eat also affects the brain. And we're realizing that certain ways of eating, for example, the Mediterranean-style diet, eating carbohydrates that the primary source are green leafy vegetables, fruits, like blueberries, strawberries, for example. There's brain-healthy fats, for example, fatty fish, salmon, lake trout, mackerel, herring, albacore tuna, sardines. These are brain-healthy fats. And then there's protein, so more lean proteins like white meat chicken, white meat turkey. By eating in a certain way, like the Mediterranean style did, and also incorporating exercise, we can really have a positive impact on the brain.
Same things we hear about how to get a stronger heart, else the same thing with a stronger mind. So what else is on the horizon? Is there any way of, there is no known cure right now. There are treatments.
Correct.
Is there any promise out there you can say to these folks who are watching right now and are so concerned about this, either the onset or they have a loved one who has Alzheimer's?
Well, I think that the main thing is that we are looking towards the future where we can detect the disease at earlier stages, that we can, yes, we are trying to attack the disease at its fundamental core, but like I said, there are other things that we can do to manage our risk, to prevent the disease itself from impacting the body, whether it be nutrition, exercise, the other medications that we're taking, sort of looking at the psychiatric symptoms of Alzheimer's disease that also impact our patients, like anxiety and depression.
Any research leading towards perhaps a vaccine?
So there have been some vaccine trials that have been unsuccessful, but that still is an approach that's being looked at in addition to the antibody trials.
Okay, I want to take a break. I want to get back. I want to hear specifically, you have both programs that you're working on, and we'll hear more about that as Pix 11 News Close-Up continues. Stay with us. Back now with Dr. Richard Isaacson and Dr. Arjun Masurkar. We're talking about Alzheimer's and looking for, hopeful, some cure down the line. But right now, there is none in sight. What can people do to prevent the onset of Alzheimer's? You say it goes back many, many years. What can we do?
So there's no magic pill or a magic blueberry a person can eat to prevent or cure Alzheimer's, but there are multiple things that people can do. And I think some people have fear. You know, I have a family history. I think people who are watching, it's a terrible, horrible illness. But you have to put the fear aside and get educated and get informed. Knowledge is power. If you grab the bull by the horns and you learn what your risks are, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, having high blood sugar or diabetes, eating processed foods, not exercising, being stressed out, not sleeping. These are all things that anyone today, right now, can make a positive change for a benefit later. The statistics show that 1 out of every 3 cases of Alzheimer's disease may be preventable if that person does everything right. Now, the other 2 out of 3 cases, well, maybe we can't prevent it, but even if we can delay it by a month, 6 months, a year or 2 years, then we've made some progress.
You mentioned one factor, sleep. Sleep deprivation, there is a correlation between sleep deprivation and Alzheimer's.
Yeah, absolutely. When the body is sleeping, the toxic proteins, that amyloid that you talked about earlier, it kind of gets disposed of. The garbage trucks come and dispose of it. If someone's burning the candle at both ends, not exercising to loosen up that plaque and not sleeping to dispose of that plaque, person is not going to do well.
Now, you're working on a study with the Alzheimer's Association on something called trial match. What is that?
So we're actually, so I'll talk about 2 opportunities, because I really do think that to find ways to prevent Alzheimer's disease, we really need the general public to be engaged and to volunteer in our studies. So one way is through the Alzheimer's Association. They have a website, trialmatch.alz.org.
Let's put that on the screen, trialmatch.alz.org.
Yeah, so the Alzheimer's Association is the largest non-federal, nonprofit organization that funds Alzheimer's research. And so that website, you can enter and you can be linked up to studies going on. At NYU, we have a very large 400-person study of elderly folks in the community. We're looking at factors that impact normal aging and how that can progress to dementia.
Now, you have an education course that you offer as well online.
Exactly, yes. So we've tried to develop coursework for people of all ages, from high school courses, college courses, courses for the general public about prevention, and even healthcare providers. So that website is Alzheimer's Universe, or ALZU.org.
ALZU.org.
Yep, and these are free courses anyone can take 24/7 online.
I read somewhere that Alzheimer's is not an old age disease. Is that one of the myths?
I agree with that statement. I think Alzheimer's disease is a younger person and middle-aged person's disease. Again, it starts in the brain decades before symptoms. People in their 30s, people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s, that's when you have to be serious about reducing risk.
I have to ask about this because there are so many food supplements out on the market. I get mail all the time, you know, brain power, there's turmeric, and there's this drug and that. Any of that effective, or is that all hype?
Well, my thought is as follows. When I take care of my patients, I definitely ask them to tell me all the supplements they're taking. We talk about these natural products. There's no hard evidence that they work. Maybe that'll come in the future. However, some of them are used in foods and they're perfectly healthy. So I say, you know, why not? If you feel better taking them, that's okay. But as long as you discuss it with your physician.
There's another one they call Prevagen. They say help with mind power. Is that another?
So that may not be top on my list, and I don't recommend that specifically, but I do think that in certain cases, if someone has a nutritional deficiency, if someone has an elevated blood marker, if someone has a specific thing to be addressed, then maybe a vitamin or supplement can help, but not in the general case.
Well, you guys are the investigators, the researchers. Can you say as we end this segment that you have some hope for the future?
Oh yeah, we have setback after setback in this disease, but I have hope. I think the next 5 to 7 years, we got this.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. Dr. Richard Isaacson, Dr. Arjun Masurkar, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for our program for this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website, pix11.com/newscloseup. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.